Must be a slow news day. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. I want to take a moment to address with you questions that Comptroller Mendoza has taken the opportunity to raise this week. First of all, let me say that my heart goes out to every first responder, healthcare worker, or resident sickened by COVID-19 and still dealing with the lingering effects of this disease. It's a brutal and dangerous disease, as we've learned too well over these last few years. And that's why Dr. Arwady and I, on a regular basis, but particularly at the height of COVID, fought so hard to make sure that our first responders and other essential workers had everything that they needed to protect themselves from COVID, including PPE, protocols, testing, vaccine, access, and other protections to keep them safe. You've heard me say from this and other podiums many times, of the three things that I was most worried about during the height of COVID, making sure that our healthcare workers and our first responders were supported was one of the things that we were supremely focused on in those early days. And to that point, we spent literally millions of dollars and countless time and energy to make sure that folks were educated and urged to take advantage of testing, and then when the vaccines came online to get vaccinated. Let me also take you back to 2020. Nationwide, the #1 cause of death of police officers at that time was COVID-19. And you may remember that we lost 4 officers here before the vaccine was available. Those deaths not only were horribly tragic and sent shockwaves through the department, not to mention the incredible toll taken on the families and the survivors of those officers. So any suggestion that I or anyone in my administration is indifferent to the cause and suffering of first responders when it comes to COVID issues, it's just utter nonsense. Let me shift gears and address this pension question. In my administration, we simply don't play politics with the pension code, and we don't play politics with the law. Our city and our state, unfortunately, as many of you know and have reported upon, have a long sordid history of politicians and other clouded individuals bending the pension system to their will, to the total disadvantage of taxpayers. And as far as I'm concerned, those days are over. The 4 pension boards must be independent, and the claimants appearing before them have a right to expect that they will receive individualized review of their specific cases. And each pension board must act without fear or favor. Now, I'm told that since I took office, across all of our 4 pension boards, there have literally been hundreds of claims that have been filed. I never ask, nor do I receive any information about any of them, nor would I. No one gets special treatment because of who they are or to whom they're related. And that doesn't change whether we're in the week before an election or at any other time of the year. I don't get involved with, and I definitely don't interfere with pension board decisions. The members of the pension boards have a clear mandate to follow the pension code, which is defined by the legislature in Springfield. Now, maybe it worked differently in the past, but under my administration, pension benefits aren't determined on the basis of my personal relationships or personal feelings about anyone or their brother. And frankly, that's how it should be. Now, if the law needs to be changed, then Springfield should act to ensure greater protection of our first responders under the pension code. And we will join anyone of goodwill in making sure that we do the right thing and make the changes that are necessary to protect our first responders. But again, it's not about me making these individualized decisions. Folks, I know that we're in the final week of a long campaign, and you've heard me call this the silly season, and we're probably on the silly season on steroids 1 week out. And I understand the tensions are high over a very difficult issue that is very personal to some. But as a former member of law enforcement myself, I have and will continue to endeavor to do the right thing by our first responders, and I will work with anyone to do that. So let's work to fix what is broken, if it's broken, but the leveling of accusations on people for following the law is simply unnecessary, unfair, and false. So I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. Members of the media, Tiernan and I will bring down the mic to you. 2 questions per reporter. We'll kick it off with Amanda, WTTW, right in front.
Mayor, I know that you say that you did not interfere based on anybody individually, but was there ever any sort of directive given to pension boards to keep an eye on finances and be particularly judicious about any decision they may make?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Do you believe that Springfield, you said, if the law needs to be changed, then Springfield should act to ensure greater protection? Does Springfield need to act? What is your belief in terms of the particulars of the case of Sergeant Mendoza and others in his situation? Is this a law that does need to be changed?
Look, I'm not going to get into the particulars of anybody's individual case, as I said. That's simply not appropriate for me. That was adjudicated before the pension board, and as I understand it, was taken to the circuit court, and the circuit court has ruled. I think these are difficult circumstances because we've never been through a pandemic before. We've never had this pension board, to my knowledge, never had to face these kinds of difficult decisions. So I think that if there's something that needs to be changed, if there's greater guidance and clarity that they need to get, that should, of course, be done in conjunction with public health and medical experts. But again, I don't know the particulars of the law as applied by the pension board, but certainly we'll study the legislation that's been filed and lend our support where we can.
Mary Ann, NBC.
Can you give us an update on the AFSCME negotiations? There might be some 3,000 workers who stage a walkout. Could you think that might happen?
You know, again, I don't want to negotiate here in the press. We have been working very hard, I'd say both sides, to try to reach some resolution. I think the updates that I've received is that we're moving solidly in the right direction, but I don't have any reason to believe that there will be any kind of work disruption.
And are they trying to also tie this, as it is, as you mentioned, silly season, but I mean, are they trying to pressure you because of the election?
Well, everybody's trying to get their advantage during this time period, but I don't know. Look, this has been a process that has been going on for quite some time. I think both sides, and I know I'll speak for myself, we have great interest in resolving all outstanding labor disputes, but we got to do it in a way that is fair for the union and the members, but also fair to our taxpayers. So that sometimes takes some time. We've resolved, I think, the larger issues with COOP. We've resolved, I think, almost every outstanding issue with individual trade unions. AFSCME is one of the last ones that's outstanding, and hopefully we'll get it done in a timely fashion.
And then could you also react to the Anjanette Young endorsement today for Brandon Johnson? Are
Yeah,
you disappointed?
she's entitled to support whoever she wants.
But she says
Craig, WBBM.
she's disappointed in what happened at the Anjanette. The promises that you gave her did not come true.
Well, as I've said before, I met with her. I think that I know the date was December 31st because it was my wife's birthday. We sat down. We had, I thought, a very candid conversation, and I expressed to her my deepest sympathy for the horrible trauma that she had gone through. She indicated at that time that there were specific things that she wanted. And then we started negotiating with her lawyer. Her lawyer told us that her interest was in a monetary settlement, which she, as you know, she received. We asked specifically several times in writing if there was anything else that she wanted, and we were told in writing by her lawyer, no, there was nothing else, which frankly was a surprise to me, given the fact that she had articulated specific interests in other things which were not articulated at the time of our meeting, but in the interest of other things beyond a monetary settlement and compensation for the harm that was caused to her. So I can only tell you what I know from our lawyers, what they ask of her lawyer, but she has a right to support anyone that she wants.
I want to go back to the pension, but not in the individual case, but in the aggregate. And that is this idea that if you die of COVID, and this was something that they brought up at the news conference and elsewhere, if you die of COVID, there is a presumption that it was in the line of duty and you get the duty benefits. But if you're disabled by it, then there is, some question and perhaps, a presumption that you can't prove who gave it to you, that you don't get those benefits. Does that not seem inequitable? And then giving rise to people saying you're worth more dead than alive.
Well, I wouldn't ever say that, all right? We don't want anyone to die from any illness, and certainly not from COVID. And as I mentioned, and hopefully you recall, we've spent a tremendous amount of time, resources, and energy making sure that residents of the city understood the dangers of COVID, took precaution to protect themselves. And obviously, since December of 2020, we've been emphasizing over and over and over again for people to get vaccinated, to get boosted, get to the next level of boosting. So what I would say is, I think what's important here is that the pension boards, whether it's police, fire, laborers, muni boards, that they have access to outside medical experts who can help them and inform them on these individualized decisions, so that they know what they should be looking for in these individualized cases, but also they need to articulate to the claimants that are coming before them what the kind of proof is that the board is going to be looking for in order to make a fair assessment of their claims, whether it's for full disability, whether it's for partial disability. There need to be rules guided by the science and data, and that has to be transparent and articulated to the claimants that are coming before them.
And then turning to the more political side, this is a time when what you say in public can be dissected and criticized. Obviously,
This is a time? Isn't that every day?
Yeah, probably. Obviously, you were criticized for suggesting that some voters who feel a certain way might want to just stay home, and now and you are criticizing Paul Vallis for what you were calling dog whistles.
Well, I addressed this yesterday, but I'll say it again for your purposes. If I misspoke, I misspoke. I've been very, very consistent from day one. Said it again yesterday. I'll say it again here. People need to vote. And it doesn't matter who they're voting for. Of course, I want every vote, right? But it's important that people vote. I'm very concerned about the lack of participation, not just in this election, but you can see really for the last few years, people are not as engaged. And to me, what is the most powerful tool in our democracy, which is the right to vote. And we've got to do everything we can to encourage people to participate in our system. If you don't vote, in my view, you're giving your power away to someone else. So what I say is vote, vote, vote. There's voting now that's available in all of the 50 wards. The super site, I think, is still open. But I want to make sure that people vote. If you're 18, vote. If you're not registered, you can vote. You can get registered on site and then vote. But the most important thing is for people to vote, vote, vote. Look, Paul Vallis has been blowing dog whistles almost every day of this campaign. So unfortunately, you've got to be a little more specific. Is it the dog whistle about let's take back our city before it's too late? You've been around long enough to know that that's shades of Bernie Epton. Vote for Epton before it's too late. That is a clear racist call to action. And it should have no place in this campaign or any campaign. People should be voting based upon the merits. People should make an assessment of whatever the candidate is articulating and what matches up with their own values, what's important to them. But this constant dangling of, I think, tropes that we see coming out of him, promising the sun, the moon, and stars, depending on who the audience is, that it should give everyone pause, as it should give people pause that he has wrapped his arm around John Cantazzara, the FOP president, who, in my estimation, is one of the most bigoted people that we've seen in public life. You know, we're talking about the vaccine. He called the city's vaccine mandate something akin to Nazism in the Holocaust, which is ridiculous and offensive, and I think was widely and appropriately condemned. The fact that Paul Vallas says, "Oh, I didn't know that I was at Awake Illinois and what they stood for." But the truth is, as Awake Illinois put out themselves, that wasn't the first time he was with them. He was at another rally where he said that the president of Awake Illinois should run for governor against the Democratic governor, J.B. Pritzker. So he's got a track record of playing footsie with these far right-wing fringes of the Republican Party and people whose values, I think, are completely out of touch with the mainstream here in our city. And I have serious questions, as you should, about whether this guy even lives in Chicago, given the fact that he's apparently got some room in Bridgeport, but his wife and his family all live in Palos, and that's where the homestead tax exemption is taken. There's a lot of things about Paul Vallas that he says now in an airbrush campaign way that simply don't add up. And, you know, I could go on, but, you know, I think one of the biggest things is that he's got this plan to fight crime that is going to turn the tide that no one else has discovered. I mean, it's nonsense. When he was in charge of the police budget back in the 90s, the first year, homicides were at 851. The second year, they went up to 927. The third year, they went up to 940. Far worse than they are now. So anybody that thinks that guy has a plan for fighting crime and violence in the city, I got a bridge to sell you.
Charlie, CBS.
Mayor, I know you said that if tweaks do need to be made to the pension system, so be it, and let that play out. But the comptroller said that there's been an impossible standard of proof that's been established that really ensures that officers have no path to get an on-duty pension disability. What do you say to the comptroller?
I don't get involved in individual cases, but that is not my sense of things. And as I said, the board is evenly divided between 4 officers and 4 city financial experts. And in my experience with the pension board before I became mayor, most times there was a deference to providing some kind of benefit to officers that came before them. So I'm not sure where she gets that and what facts, but that certainly seems inconsistent with my anecdotal knowledge prior to the time that I became mayor, but also looking at the composition of the board. That seems inconsistent to me with what I think the realities are.
And I understand you were made aware.
And obviously you all could do your own homework on what the decisions that have been made. There have been hundreds, I think, not just across the police pension board, but all 4 boards combined. You can take a look and do the analysis yourself.
And I understand you were made aware of the comptroller's personal situation at a social event. Can you characterize that conversation, the temperature of that conversation, and how you both left it from there?
Well, we were at an event. She was sitting on a dais, as I was, and I went and greeted all the other members of the dais. And when I got to her, she was extraordinarily, look, I want to give her some grace here, but she was extraordinarily emotional and let fly some accusations. And I thought in that circumstance it was probably best as if I just let her be, and I walked away.
John Lewis, WGN.
Mayor, the first question I have has to do with the board itself and the decision. I know you said you don't want to get into the details of this, but the board's decision happens to be in my hand, and its independent medical examiner, Dr. Susan Buchanan, said in her opinion, therefore it is more likely than not his strokes, meaning Mr. Mendoza, resulted from his COVID-19 infection, which he likely acquired from work. Given that, do you agree with the board's decision, and do you think that there should be a different proof for these types of cases?
It's not for me to second guess the decision of the pension board, and I'm not going to. I wasn't there. I don't know. The evidence wasn't presented to me. You read me a snippet of a
You have
opinion-
access to this report as well.
Well, what I'm saying to you, it's not for me to second-guess a decision that was rendered by a board where I didn't hear the evidence, I didn't have any ability to question the witnesses that were there. It's not appropriate. The boards have to be independent. And frankly, what I'm concerned about now, in light of all this attention, is does the board feel now actually that it can act independently? Does it feel like, oh my goodness, they have to be on the lookout for somebody's last name and who they're connected to? If we get to that point, then we will have destroyed the independence of the board. And frankly, people appearing before it will not have confidence that they are going to get the kind of individualized evaluation of their claims that they're entitled to. So I'm not going to sit here and play Monday morning quarterback about something that I don't know anything about, that I wasn't there. The board rendered its decision. That decision, as I understand it, was affirmed by a court that evaluated all the evidence. Why would I try to get myself and insert myself in there? I said at the outset, the days of politicians sticking themselves and putting themselves in the middle of individualized pension decisions, that should be in a far rear view mirror, and it is as far as I'm concerned.
That was my next discussion with you. It was upheld by a state court, the decision to deny coverage, his claim. Given that, why do you think that the controller came after you personally in this press conference a week before the election, given the fact that you both went up against one another in a crowded field 4 years ago for this job? Why did you answer that, and why did you feel that you needed to personally respond to this instead of leaving your statement to suffice?
Well, you're going to have to ask the comptroller about the curious timing of her decision.
Justin Lawrence?
Hold on a second.
Sorry about that.
Give me a second, Susan. It's not lost on me that this is a press conference in City Hall a week before the election. You can draw your own conclusions as to why that's happening. But you really ought to ask that question to her. I'm not in her head. I didn't know anything about it until my team told me that she had given an interview to a reporter yesterday, and then I heard earlier today about it. But given the interest, I felt like it was necessary for me to set the record straight. Again, I appreciate that she has a lot of emotion. What little I know about her, she cares deeply about her family. But making up accusations and suggesting that somehow I acted inappropriately, she's not entitled to her own facts.
Justin Lawrence?
Yes, sir.
In the Sun-Times on this story, it says you met with Mendoza, or you ran into each other at the Hacia event, but she says specifically that you both asked her why she hadn't contacted you sooner than that, and that you asked, "Is there anything I can do to fix it?" Did you specifically say anything to her that might have made her believe that had she contacted you prior to when you saw her, or that after that conversation that you could do something to change the outcome here?
That's not my recollection of the very brief exchange that we had. As I mentioned, she was extremely emotional. And under the circumstances, and particularly because we were in a public place, I listened to her. I listened to what she had to say. It was probably maybe a minute or two interaction, and then I returned to my seat.
Okay, and separately, there's this outside spending group, the 77 committee, run by one of your former, campaign advisors, and it's allowing people who would otherwise not be limited to what they could contribute to your campaign. They're allowed to give much more unlimited amounts to the 77 committee. I know that you can't directly coordinate with the 77 committee, but is this something that you think is appropriate for people who would otherwise be limited in what they can contribute to your campaign to be able to give unlimited amounts of money?
Well, not only can I not participate in that, I don't. And so one would presume, but I don't know for a fact that they're following the law. And I think that's really the relevant question. But that's not something that I'm directly involved with, nor would I be.
Craig Wall, ABC7.
Mayor, going back to the pension issue, You said that if the law needs to be changed, it needs to be changed. But let's just talk in hypotheticals, right, without any specific case. For consistency purposes, if the board is going to say that officers are considered to have contracted COVID while on the job if they die, shouldn't the board also be considering they contracted COVID while on the job if they just become disabled? Doesn't that sound like that would be the right kind of fix for this, to be consistent in the presumption?
Well, I don't know that that's not what they're doing. As I said, I'm not involved in those decisions. I certainly haven't gone back and looked at individualized decisions that they've made about people who are coming forward. I couldn't even tell you the number of COVID-related claims that have come before the board. But you want, as any tribunal, two things. Number one, you've got to take the facts as they are, but they've got to be viewed within a certain standard. I would hope that the board is using a particular standard and lens by which they're evaluating these, but also allowing for the individualized evaluation of those claims. If it's cookie cutter and one size fits all, they're not going to be fair to the unique circumstances of individual claimants that are coming before it. That's the whole point of having an independent board, having people have the ability to come before them, present their case, present the facts, and then let the board evaluate those claims and render a decision. But I can't speculate, because I don't know the facts, about how they're making their decisions.
We are 1 week out, as you know. Also
Yes, I'm
know that
aware.
you're mayor. Remember that from the other day. How are you feeling about where things are? I mean, you seem to be coming under fire from many sides, as the incumbent often does, but
The incumbent is always a piñata. Goes with the territory. I feel very good about where we are. I feel very confident about the outcome, but I take nothing for granted, and we've got to make sure that people turn out and vote. I'm not going to leave anything to chance. We're running hard everywhere, doing our work to make sure that we are reaching voters, encouraging them to express themselves by going to the polls and voting.
Melanie Blackwood?
Hi, Mayor. As everyone's been saying, 1 week out here. This question is in relation to Grant Park. Coming up here, getting into the summer season, the leagues have been reaching out to the parks to attain permits to play this summer, and they've been told by the Park District that that won't be possible due to
I'm sorry, who's been reaching out?
summer leagues that play at Grant Park and attain permits to do so. They've been reaching out to Grant Park, and Grant Park has told these leagues that they will be unable to play a season due to new events being hosted at Grant Park, specifically NASCAR. Wanted to get a comment from you on that, and if you believe this is an issue related to accessibility for people to be able to use Grant Park for what they believe its purpose is.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anything related to that, so I hesitate to comment.
Thanks a lot, Mayor. Thank you, everyone. That's a wrap.
Thank you.
Have a great day.